Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Connected Life peeps. We're really excited about this episode today. And before we jump into it, we're having some guests on that everybody loves. So
yes.
y'all have heard them before, and they're on again. And it is Jonny and Pietze.
Oh.
Or should I say Pietze and Jonny? Whose name does go first?
I mean, if you're asking me, it's Pietze and Jonny. That's how we did our wedding invitations.
It's
I to make
always
sure
been Pietze and Jonny.
it's always been Pietze
What?
and Jonny.
Why is it that in my head I'm like, yep, that would make sense?
Because you know me too well.
It's so
And it's
funny.
annoying.
It's so funny. Well, before we get rocking and rolling, everybody, we've been telling you Pathway to Freedom is out there. It has been launched. It is going. It is the last course that we're going to do in 2023. We're not going to see another course till Living Fully Alive 2024. But right now, we've told people that applications have opened for the Life Consulting Masterclass. And these two go hand in hand. If you want to get equipped to become a consultant or just get radical life transformation, that's what Life Consulting Masterclass is. However, in order to partake in that,
It's like a full-on part-time school.
yes.
It will transform your life and give you a lot of information, a lot of great experiences, and a lot of great community.
Yeah. So with that said, a prerequisite to it is the Pathway to Freedom. And if you do get into LCMC, you actually can apply the money that you paid for the Pathway to Freedom towards your tuition. So that'll be taken off if you get in. If you don't, you took the Pathway to Freedom and you got transformation in that as well.
Well, this is we designed it this way because we think the Pathway to Freedom is the core basis that every human needs to know to go on their own transformation journey, and what they need to know to take other people on transformation journeys. So that's why it's like the base. You have to go through the Pathway of Freedom to be able to get into the LCMC school. And we highly recommend doing it with us because it's the best way to do it is to do it on the live where you actually get to participate.
Yeah, so you'll get to know more about the Pathway to Freedom. If you don't know more, if you've been listening for a while, you've heard about it, you're already jonesing to get into it, it's available. You can go to Justin and Abby, that's abi.com, and you can go ahead and sign up for the Pathway to Freedom under the courses. If you want to apply, because there's a full application process for LCMC, and it's very limited the number we let people we let in there is an application page under the Life Consulting Masterclass under courses. So you can do that. You can apply. It costs you nothing to apply. It costs us everything to read your application.
That got me. And for those of you who don't know, me and Pietze created the Pathway to Freedom course together a few years ago, and it has pretty big ripple effects. If you guys have done Pathway before, I'd recommend you do it again because we have gone over this over and over again, and every year we go over it, the deeper it gets and the more life transformation we've had. But for those of you who don't know, the Pathway to Freedom, me and Pietze recorded it, and then Jonny edited it, which meant he had to watch it
which meant I had to deal with Pietze and Abby being like, I don't like the way I look in that shot. Can you change it a little bit?
I don't like how he said that. Can we cut that out?
Can we find a different one where I say the word and
triggered
differently?
him. See, we planned this out because we triggered him so that then he could watch it and then go on his own healing journey by the triggers we caused
I had to go on a healing journey after editing it. It's real stuff.
But jokes aside, having to edit it, and by having to mean like that was your choice, transformed your life. So if you want to give just like a brief overview of that, and then you can jump into what we're talking about this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we were talking about this earlier today because it's been a minute since I was doing this. And actually, I did we filmed it. So I watched all of it in first person, while we were filming it.
Yep.
So that was kind of where the language started setting in a little bit. And then it was actually, I had some time off from my main job. And so I did a quick rough edit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just wasn't quite the time to launch it yet.
Yeah.
You know? So it just sat for a minute. And then when I did the final edit where I came through and polished everything
Which
up.
was like a year later.
Yeah, it was something like a year after we had
half.
filmed it or something like that. And that was right in the middle of like a really crisis moment in my life emotionally. That kind of third pass through. So to your point, for those of you who have done it before, maybe it is a good idea to do it again. Because for me, it wasn't until like really that third time that, man, it just started
to click,
changing things on a really big level.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was chaos before that. Like our life was just, I don't know if we want to just dive in, but it was.
Well, I guess let's just say that the point of this podcast is really talking about the transformation. We've talked about the transformation of our marriage and how Jonny starting to edit really led to us transforming our marriage and working through our pain. But there's a whole nother side of that, which is that we both personally really transformed through this process. And in turn, our whole family has transformed. The way we do family, the way we relate to our kids' temperaments, because of what we've learned. And so, we were like, we should share the other side of this, which is this whole crazy transformation of ourselves and our family. And so I would say before this, we were the family that was, gosh darn it, we were trying our hardest.
Oh, we were trying so hard.
Like, we were trying so hard.
You guys remember?
Yeah.
You guys
Justin
remember
and Abby walked it with us. They got on phone calls where we were sobbing and couldn't get our head above water and depressed.
Well, not me. I didn't believe in crying back then.
Yeah, you didn't believe
Jonny
in crying.
never cried or shared any feelings or knew what was going on inside of him that matter.
He was a rusty robot that needed some oil.
Oh, gosh.
More than some oil. Like a new person. But
yeah, but I do think that because we reflected a little coming into these podcasts and thinking back on some of the years leading up to the initial development of some of the concepts that became pathways.
Yeah.
Right. It was just crazy in our life. And there was a sense of victimness to it.
Yeah.
There's very much, and not in like a poor me kind of way, but more in I am looking at every element of my life and I can't figure out which one I can change that will actually make things better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had kind of gotten to a point where it felt like nothing we could change would help.
Yes.
Right. And then that's where, much to my chagrin, Pietze was like, well, if we can't change the circumstances, we have to change ourselves. I was like, oh gosh, here we go.
Well, because I really want to explain this, because even some of the families that we work with now and couples and people we work with, you don't actively choose chaos.
Yes.
And you don't realize that you are on a subconscious level addicted to it,
Right.
And so it just became this thing of like life circumstance. And we would truly find ourselves in positions where we didn't choose the chaos, but we couldn't stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was just like, we would get our head above water and then the next thing would hit. And then the next thing would hit. And you find yourself so far behind, like relationally, there's no more margin. There's no more margin for your kids. There's no more margin for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it just creates this cyclical effect where you just end up in cycles of chaos. And, you, Abby, all the time would be like, you guys are in a cycle of chaos. And I'd be like, yeah, no shit.
Well, let's talk about how it really went down. Because the first time I said it, you're like, no, I don't think that's true.
Yeah. I mean, the denial is really strong with me. Let's just say that.
Then eventually you're like, oh, I think that is true. And then you tried really hard. Here's what I'll say. You and Jonny tried really hard. What can we change externally to break the cycle of chaos? And when we talk about the cycle of chaos, it's like being at the end of your rope all the time, being at the end of your margin all the time, constantly feeling like you said with your head going under the water and then not getting enough time to breathe, that system.
Yeah.
And really, what we've understood now is how much living out of a dysregulated nervous system is just a domino effect. You know, so in that season, I faced a really awful health crisis. Our daughter's autism was out of control. Our son started developing OCD. We were desperately trying to make money to buy a house and just make it, you know? And so it doesn't feel like you're choosing it, and it doesn't feel like there's a way out.
Well, and like we're getting to the end of every month and there's not extra, and I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. There's always enough, but there's not extra. So it's not like, oh, we should probably slow down.
Right.
Because if we slow down, we don't pay the mortgage. You know, there was, and you see that.
Which I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like if you stop any moment on that hamster wheel, everything
is going to
crumble.
Falls apart. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how it felt. So it felt so overwhelming to be like, you know, really there was this process of like, okay, denial, and then awareness, and then acceptance, and then healing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it was so hard to go from the denial to the acceptance and then to the healing.
Yeah.
Because it feels so like you just can't get your head above water.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I will say that this is not true for everyone, but for me personally in Pathways, the awareness was one of the big missing pieces. And that was one of the things that was so helpful for Pathways for me, is because I am a very practical person. I know now how to connect to my emotions, but I didn't in any way.
Yeah,
totally.
You know, and so once I started putting together the blueprint internally of what was going on, the awareness, really, you can't get to a place where you accept your life and get vision for your life and find peace in the now if you don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to actually really get in touch with the pain that's there and let yourself feel it.
Yeah, which I think is so great. What you're saying is like you felt the pain of the current circumstances. Like you felt the chaos. You felt we don't have margin. You felt that pain.
Yeah.
But you had no idea that there was subconscious so much more going on.
Well, yeah. And I think, you know, and this is what we're going into this
Just
episode.
jump into
but
it.
The beliefs underneath for me, which really were uncovered in Pathways. The beliefs were the things that were continuing to keep us in the cycle of chaos, right? Because and I'm sure you guys know this, being life consultants, it's easy watching other people's lives and being like, oh, you should change this thing.
That is so real.
Oh, it's so real. But for us, you know, when you have these beliefs, like for me, one of my big beliefs coming out of childhood was, if you waste your life, I grew up a Christian, and I grew up with this very strong belief that I needed to get to the end of my life having done something pretty impressive.
Like epic, change the world.
Change the world.
Change the world.
No
or
pressure.
made a
No
lot
pressure.
of money to support the kingdom, or done something really just
remarkable.
And I think that was a main message preached in the 90s and early 2000s to our generation, which is find out what your destiny is and live it out. And really, you're only as good as if you do full-time ministry or if you do something great for the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was a big theme preached.
Yeah. And all the
great.
Sorry. I was just going to say all the mediocre people go to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't preached like
there
that.
It wasn't preached like that, but there was a feeling. I do remember, like, you didn't go to youth conferences, or at least I didn't.
Yeah.
And hear any message that in any way glorified
being normal,
working a normal job and taking care of your kids. Maybe Promise Keepers. I went to Promise Keepers one time, and that one probably glorified it. You know, but that was for dads. That wasn't for us. You know, you go to a youth conference and it's missions or all this. Anyways, so that was my mindset. And so
how did that, like, so I think you should go into marriage.
Wait, can I have to do this because it's ADD in my head. I went to this concert like a year ago, and there's this kid who grew up in the church, and he wrote this like heavy metal song, and in the middle he just screams, "I don't want to change the world, I'm just a freaking kid. I don't want to change the world, I'm just a freaking kid." He screams it like 5 times, and I like teared up at it because I was like, yeah, when you hear it, like he's, like 17. So you're like, yeah, that is a lot of freaking pressure to put on a young kid.
100%. And I think it's not bad to inspire passion and vision and living out of a whole heart for God. But I think that was so overly glorified that there wasn't a counterbalance.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to be a Billy Graham.
Yeah.
Most of us are going to get married, work jobs, have kids. And then what do you do with yourself then? Because you feel like a failure.
Yeah.
So
well, and honestly,
we all want to say something. We all want to say
We're
something.
all so excited about this.
Yeah. I do want to add this, that even outside of the institutionalized religious system, you now have social media that's demanding that we're super high influencers. It's like you should be able to be famous because you have access to Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or something like that. And if you're not doing that, then your life's really not going anywhere. So that transcends. There's a generation that within the confines of the institution got that message. Then you get outside of it and it just got multiplied all over the place. And so I think that is a common theme that a lot of people right now are currently dealing with, whether or not they have a faith background. They're sitting there going like, does my life matter at all? Because I see these really cool things going on around the world in my neighbors' lives as they're showing the highlight reel of everything. And I'm really tormented because I'm quote unquote just a dad, just a mom, just a parent, just, working this job to actually take care of my family.
Well, and then, so I agree. It doesn't feel like just a 90s thing, and it doesn't feel like just a church thing, because I think it's a prevalent constant. One of the things I was going to say is I think it's how so many of us avoid our lives. Like if I have a dream of doing something where I am significant, where I'm known, where I do something remarkable, it saves me from the shame I'm in right now. It saves me from the hopelessness I'm in right now. It saves me, like, so much of my I need to do something great wasn't from the church. So much of my I need to do something great was like, I want something that means I was worth it.
Yeah.
Something that means all this pain was worth it. Like I used purpose as a painkiller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I needed a great purpose so that I could say something was worth all this hell that I've been through, or something. Like I needed something to look forward to get me out of the present, which is not a healthy way to live, but that is how I lived.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I very much resonate with that. Even with our kids, our daughter is autistic, and that has been a whole big part of our story. But recently I was thinking about it, and, the way I was raised and the belief system that I uncovered during walking through all of this always led me to believe that even in the struggle, like with her autism, that there had to be some purpose. There had to be some, like, we're going to write a book someday and it's going to change people and help all the people. And I had this moment where I'm like, what if the investment I'm investing in her dies with her? And that's actually okay.
Like,
because
is it
she's
enough?
worth it.
Right.
Because she's worth it to God.
Yeah, like there's a possibility she could never be in a relationship. And it's not like, oh, we invested all this love and then it went on for generations. And
but it's how you define worth, how you define the worth of your investment. Is it about accomplishment? What is it about? So anyways.
So good.
It's huge. I remember that being a really pivotal moment. And when you think about it, how crazy that we would say it isn't worth it to love a kid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, and it's just funny to love them for the sake of loving them. Like,
and if you were to ask us,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Abby.
You go, girl.
I was just saying, if you were to ask us, we would have, logically and out of our conscious mind said, yes, she's worth our whole life. And that's what and we truly thought we're giving up so much and sacrificing so much for her. But what our beliefs showed is that it actually wasn't enough. She wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Loving her wasn't enough, because of the deep hole inside of both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another whole element of, what was happening prior to me going on my emotional health journey as well was I had been in a band for years and years and years, as anybody who has listened to us on the podcast before knows. But I was in a Christian band and we toured. We were gone all the time. And it had kind of gotten to the point where I knew that if I didn't quit the band, like things were just not going to get better in our marriage. Like I knew that it was time. We had Yana. She was a really hard baby. She was almost 2. And so I quit the band. And in the process of that, as we have said on here before, but it came out that I had been lying about a porn addiction for several years. I had been lying about smoking and drinking. It was rare that I didn't start drinking at noon or before, I wasn't drunk, but I was just kind of to
Happy.
take the edge off all the time, and I think that in retrospect, I don't think that I could face the pain of what a mess my life was based on the shiny thing that I thought it was going to be,
Right.
You
had this image in your head of what you thought life would be.
And what our marriage would be and what being a parent would be and all of these things. But I wasn't really aware of the pain either. So I couldn't face it. And so it's just numbing out. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are very, very familiar with that cycle. But I remember coming off of that because that was a rough summer. That was 8 years ago next month. 8 years ago. And I remember sitting in the church. We went to a church and like once a month, it was several campuses and they'd all get together. And I remember sitting there and the guy was speaking. He said, one thing that isn't taught a lot is that sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's mundane. And I will never forget that moment because part of my journey, I remember thinking to myself, because I was detoxing from porn addiction. I was detoxing from nicotine addiction and alcohol addiction all at the same time.
So you're feeling
Super
bored
fun.
on every level.
And I've just come off the road where I'm super hyped up and like it's purposeful and I'm drinking Red Bull all the time and it's great.
Adrenaline, you're being in a crowd, you're doing your thing.
Everybody loves me.
Yep.
And I didn't go on the journey until Pathways. I just shoved it down. But I do remember in my body, I could feel the addiction to excitement and purpose and fun. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I just buried it. Yeah. And I buried my head in work.
Can I pause for a second? There is actually science behind how when your nervous system is dysregulated, you can become addicted to the highs that you get in your nervous system. You get hits and then you run off of dysregulation till the next hit. And that's how you survive. And you can be in a state of addiction around a dysregulated nervous system and not even realize it. But at that point, Jonny realized it. He just didn't quite know what it was or what to do with it.
Yeah. And this is so important. We're going to spend a couple episodes on talking how to regulate your nervous system and your family inside of your relationship and change it. But it's true. You will always find ways to live in the same amount of chaos. Because you're addicted to it. Your body knows that. It feels so familiar.
And that's why we talk about the subconscious choice. You think that it's just happening to you, but there is a place where you are actually choosing into it. You are thriving off of the hits of drama, even drama. Yeah. And threat. So go ahead, Jonny.
Yeah. Well, and I think we did exactly what you just said, Abby. You called it. I went straight from that to working 100 hours a week, 80 hours a week, very consistently. And we turned around financially really quickly. And I thought that I had fixed everything.
Totally.
Yeah. Because I was off the road. I was home. I was making a ton of money and we were good. Yeah. By the standards of what the band had been.
Right.
And at the same time, for the next several years, we continue to pursue dreams and visions. Like we're going to start a business. We're going to do this. It's always the carrot at the end
We're
the
going to have
stick.
another baby.
Right. We're going to have another baby. It's always something out here. If I get this thing that's out here, then I'll be
feel
okay.
complete. Then we'll feel better. If we can just get to this benchmark.
I can relax. I'll be settled. I'll feel fulfilled. I'll feel alive.
Yep.
And I don't know if the Lord just wanted us to go on this journey or what, but every step of the way, it was like crush, crush, crush. Like, we're going to do this business and we're going to go out here and do all these great things. And then situation, and then another situation, and then another situation. Just like the weight of it.
That is so relatable. I countless people have been through my office before where they're just like, they start telling you the tale of every disastrous event that like kept rolling on their lives. And it's that brutal beating that you take. It is so terrible. It's just
every time we come up for air, it's like punch right back down to the ground. Do that again.
And I'm surprised more people don't tap out, and there's like, there would have been a place where you could have easily tapped out, but you didn't.
Yeah. No, and I think, in the midst of that, there's so much. I mean, we could spend weeks just on that season alone.
And all the things that came out of it. But that's where it started. That's where it started because we got to such a rock bottom point where our daughter's her autism symptoms were out of control.
We had to move with your folks for like 4 months.
My health, I went into a 3-month migraine. I never recovered from my last pregnancy. We had a baby son. He was crazy and dysregulated.
We had a down payment saved up for a house. We had to spend it on taxes. Did you already say that one?
No. Nope. We lost so much money. We got into car accidents, hospital emergency room visits where people almost died. And, we just found ourselves in a place where it's like, I don't know what to do. And that's where I turned to Jonny and said, we can't change our circumstances. I don't know how to change any of this. The only thing that we can change is ourselves. And that was the foundation for my journey with Pathway to Freedom and really kind of starting to push Jonny. But it was at that point then that he started to go on his own journey.
Well, yeah. And I think, at one point we had met with a marriage counselor back then, just a couple times. And she said this thing, and it's so true. But I think in the moment, I thought she was completely full of it. We're recounting, like you said, all the tales of all the trauma that have happened. And she says, yeah, but none of those things actually happened. The situation's all resolved. Okay.
Yeah. Like
we had been so deep in our cycle of chaos that we had developed this belief system around it.
Around trauma.
That we just were looking, actually, I think you get into these cycles of trauma where you're actually looking for traumatic things because your identity becomes wrapped up in this chaos cycle that you're in.
Well, and your brain literally, to protect you, gets stuck in threat awareness.
Yes.
So you start to become aware of every threat that could happen, and you can't get out of processing past threats unless you actively learn what to do with your emotions in your body.
Yeah.
And I will say that probably the biggest component of all of that for us that was keeping us in that was that since day one of our marriage, most of the dysregulation triggers, issues, conflict between us had not ever been resolved.
Yep.
There had been fights after fights after fights. And so, and I, in that season, was in a place where I knew it's like when you have not gone through Pathways or a journey similar to Pathways to Freedom, where you become aware of what it is inside of you that is sending you into places you don't want to go. That subconscious mind that turns on the autopilot function from your childhood and sends you somewhere that you don't want to go. Until you go on that journey, when you are in this marriage and this cycle of pain for 10, 15 years, you become a person that you're not.
Yeah.
You become a shell of yourself because you don't know how to make sense of any of it. And it's like toxic waste under the surface that's seeping up. It's not going to kill you all at once. It's real slow. It's like that low-level depression. It's a big amount of pain seeping through the surface slowly. That's how our whole life was all the time. It was 10 years of marriage that was toxic just sitting there.
Yeah.
We couldn't look at it. We couldn't talk about it, but we also couldn't get rid of it, right?
Which I think a lot of people can identify with that. And that's usually about the time when people end up in divorces, is it's just this low level toxicity that keeps sitting there, and you do not know how to talk about it. You don't know how to approach it inside of yourself, let alone approach it with the person across from you.
Or you've tried what you thought would work and you didn't know how to get through it.
Yep. And you're in the thick of life a lot of times. You know, you're deep in careers or raising kids or different things like that.
Wouldn't you say, like, in my experience, now I'm a life consultant, which is so bizarre. And I've been doing that a little over a year now. And both in our season where Pathways was first being developed, where we were just in a rough spot, and in a lot of couples, I feel like what you see is two people who would say, I'm giving 100%.
Yes.
I don't have anything else.
That's kind of the point where it becomes a breaking point, because you get two people who really genuinely believe
they can't.
I'm giving it everything I can.
I can't give any more.
Absolutely.
I'm barely keeping my head above water. I'm at the bottom of the barrel. There's nothing left.
Which I have so much compassion for people.
Yeah.
Like when you actually understand, it's very easy. And I've been there. I've been someone who's judged circumstances. And I think we all do. We all judge other people's circumstances. But that's usually because we're disconnected from our own story. We don't have clarity on their story. And when you really get into the depth of someone's story, it gets a lot harder to judge. When you get into people's lives and you just go, what's really under the surface here? And you go, oh, it makes sense that they'd be overwhelmed. It makes sense that they don't know how to take the next steps, or they feel powerless to take the next steps and move things forward, because there's so many historic things that are all built one on top of the other inside of those circumstances. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it just breeds so much compassion inside of me when I think about all the people out there, even listening right now, that probably go, oh yeah, I totally identify with that.
Yeah. Well, and for me, because I wasn't in touch with what I was feeling. And in my mind, she was crazy, if we're being honest. Right?
Totally.
Because
I was a little crazy.
I grew up
Let's be real.
not understanding my mom's emotions and being afraid of my mom's emotions, and never really dated anybody before Pietze, never really had any, and I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, is kind of many factors, but I couldn't let her talk. Like, I don't know how long it was after my porn addiction came out that we could even have a real conversation. 2 years, maybe? Like, I could not talk about it. I would apologize, like, I'm so sorry, but I couldn't let her
process about how it affected me, or about how it hurt, or how I was feeling about it. Like, he couldn't handle it. He would just shut it down, or just shut down himself. He would vacillate. And this is what, avoidants tend to do. He would vacillate between being really defensive and then just shutting down and freeze.
Yeah.
And so he just gets stuck,
So take us on the journey of how you started transforming your purpose in the midst of this process.
Yeah. Well, in the middle of editing Pathways, and then there was 2020. And I, at the time, was working primarily, I was doing video production for live events. And so all of my jobs went away in 2020. So I went from working a zillion hours all the time to having nothing to do. And, we got really excited about church, and we got really envisioned, and we were super, like, we were going to do it. It's great. Like, we have all this time to live out our passion and our dreams. And then things got crazy, and then we got busy again, and then it got difficult again. And when it got difficult again, after a couple months, like the first couple months since 2008, probably, where I felt pretty chill, I started losing it. I started having panic attacks. And I mean, even when I was editing the final round of Pathways, I was like laying on the floor for hours at a time, not able to breathe. And it really, I mean, Pietze, it was a hard season for her, because I went dark. I was like, what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of anything? And I'm at the time like, you went 32.
Into like Eeyore, there is no reason for anything.
And really, he had been there. Like, I will say, before this, he had lived in a state of depression, low grade depression, for the 3 years before that. But it was like finally like he is like breaking as a person. Like I'm like, okay, where's this gonna go? You know?
Which, if you had known me as a kid, you would know how far that is from who I actually
Yes,
am.
totally.
You know, and so it started with me breaking, really, is what it did. And there were a couple key moments I remember. I remember the first time I cried about Yana's autism. I remember where I was sitting. I remember where Pietze was at. And it had been, years since she was diagnosed. And I'd never cried about it. But as, it was kind of a mess, because as I started feeling my emotions, I started being able to allow her to feel her emotions. But then there was 15 years of stuff that we had to, or 12 years of stuff or whatever. I don't know how long we had been married at the point.
It was like 10 or 12 years or 11 years.
Yeah, it was
like
a lot of stuff. And so in that process, then her processing her emotions, even though I was able to meet her in it, it crushed me further a little bit, because it's like sense. It was so much, and then I'm processing all this stuff with my mom and with my childhood.
But really, that's where you uncovered. It was as you were editing Pathways and you're falling apart as a person and you're like, I can't do life. What is the point of life? What am I even living? Because I think you would even hit like, you'd built this video business and it was going great, but then you're having panic attacks. You're not on top of your game. You're struggling to like keep going.
Well, and I'm looking at things and thinking, how am I going to keep this up for another 20 years?
Right.
Like this pace that I'm living at, I don't know, my body's going to break down. And my dad had a health breakdown in his 40s. So I'm starting to look at that and think about all these things. And so in the midst of this, there was one day, I think I was actually editing Pathways, and I had spent like an hour and a half laying face down on the floor in the basement.
Wow.
Just like I could not get myself to sit in front of the computer and edit. And I went so dark. I read all the way through the whole book of Ecclesiastes, which is like the best book of the Bible you can read when you're depressed.
Basically, it's the most depressing book of the Bible, but also very life-giving in a weird way.
And at the same time, yeah, it's so life-giving. It's a beautiful book. And in the midst of that, I had been connecting to the lies of my childhood, because I'm editing Pathways all day,
So he's just every hour of the day getting the information in his subconscious.
And I've been connecting to this belief, this memory I have of my mom saying to me, that talking about how she regretted not being a missionary, and how that was a moment at which into my life came the thought, you have to do something great or else you're going to be really sad about it. Right. And so I'm processing this lie as I'm editing. Right. And I'm processing my addiction to accomplishment. Like, why do because Pietze kept saying, like, the way you go about vision is really scary because you lose us in it.
Yeah.
But then when you don't have vision, you're not yourself.
Right. So you are never you.
So you're never you, because when you're the full version of you, you abandon us. But then when you don't abandon us, you just fall off the deep end. And so I'm processing through all of this as I'm editing Pathways, and I'm reading through Ecclesiastes, and I'm processing my triggers from my mom. And I think there's this moment where I connected to who I was as a kid, as a 10-year-old kid, out there on Road 17 in Fort Morgan, Colorado, in the sticks, and I just wanted to be somebody so bad. But above that, I wanted to be a good dad. And I, as a kid, as a little kid, I wanted to be married. I wanted to be a good dad. It was pretty simple. And I read through Ecclesiastes, and it ends with him saying, I've kind of come to this point where I realize that it's the gift of God to work and to eat and to drink and to trust the Lord and to, the very simple things. And I looked at my life in this beautiful house that I live in with my beautiful kids. And there was this switch that turned where I'm like, the life that I want is right in front of me. And all this other stuff out there is actually an illusion. It's not even real. I can't even have it. I'm living for something that's out there somewhere.
And you're missing the life right in front of you
And
that you prayed
I'm
for.
missing the life right in front of me. I'm missing my kids growing up.
Which is so relatable, I think, to so many parents.
Oh, yeah. Well, to parent, non-parent, most of
Yeah.
us are just missing the life right in front of us.
Yeah, because we're hoping for the next thing, or when we're gonna
Mhm.
like accomplish the thing, or feel the way, or get the boyfriend, or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah. So then in the midst of this, and then we'll go into this more in the next podcast as far as like how this whole vision affected our home. But in the midst of this, I think we had given up hope on how to have our children interact with each other in a normal way, or
Yeah.
how to have a peaceful home, right? Because our daughter's autistic,
Mhm.
our son is neurotypical,
Mhm.
and it's just a challenge figuring out how to make it work.
Mhm.
And as I'm taking the time, because connecting to my emotions for the first
Yeah.
time, weeping about things, all of a sudden I realized I could have a good life without Yana being healed, without
Wow.
things changing, you know?
Wow.
And so there was a specific trip. Actually, Pietze had come out to see you guys,
Mm-hmm.
funnily enough.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
she's
And
out-
on that trip, literally, like Johnny is, I mean, I kind of took that trip because I'm like, and he stayed with the kids, even though
I think
he
it
was
was you
having
guys' birthday maybe together or something.
Yeah, it was like one of our birthday trips. But I knew that we needed, like, I even needed space from his process, like, because I
Mhm.
needed to, like, get some perspective. And
To
I
get away
remember,
from the dark cloud.
I remember leaving, Abby dropping me off at the airport, and I was in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, how am I going to get through this, Abby? And you were like, you're going to get through it. And I was like, I feel like I'm about to eat a lot of my shit. Like, I can tell my husband
accurate.
it was. And
Yeah.
you were like, and you're going to do it well. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And it was like, exactly. It was what I needed though. But I remember leaving, like knowing when I got home, I'm like, I don't know what kind of a husband I'm coming home to,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it was crazy because when I came home, it was like God did something on that trip while I was gone. And you caught a vision for our kids.
Yeah. I mean, it had been coming a little bit. It had been a few months since I think I had wrapped up editing Pathways. And I was still very much in midlife crisis, but I just realized we can figure this out. We can actually, if we just put our minds to it. And I had seen that modeled for me. I grew up in the disability community.
Mm-hmm.
And I had seen it modeled for me of finding customized solutions in difficult situations. But something turned on in my brain. And during the time that she was gone, I don't even remember what we did. We probably started playing video games together.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just want to explain that for a second. Part of what blocked us is we kept looking at our circumstances going, we don't know how to have a normal family or a family culture and peace.
Like a
We have
family night. We wouldn't have family
a daughter
nights.
who is incredibly autistic and can't handle being around our son. And so it just felt like every circumstance where like it was blocking us from having regulation, having peace, having like there was always something, you know? And so it was while I was gone that you actually like, it's the funniest thing, but Johnny got this video game and he taught both of the kids to play it and started playing it with them. And I came home and he's like, you want to play this video game with us? And at first I was like, okay, like, how's this going to go? And we had the best time. And I was like, what just changed? Like, what is going on? You know?
Yeah. And I think from that point on, really, there was a different level of acceptance that started happening in our life. And it's interesting because at that point, I kind of started leading our family emotionally a little bit into areas that Pietze wasn't even there yet.
Wow.
I remember, because we go to a church that is charismatic, believes in healing, and that's great. And we love it.
Sure.
It's an amazing church. But I remember having a conversation and Pietze wasn't there yet, but saying like, hey, I think maybe we need to pause for a little bit on focusing so much on Yana's healing. And I think we just need to think about maybe this is the journey that we're supposed to walk right now. And maybe there's goodness inside of this journey.
Well,
right?
and really where that started is because Johnny started processing his pain with Yana. And I had processed it what I thought. I thought I had processed it a lot. I
You've-
cried about it. I had days where I had to stay in bed because I was like under it, the grief of it. And he hadn't cried at all. So I was like, I'm good. But then he would start to process his pain with me. And I would be like, I can't talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would start to talk about even the reality of like, what will it look like if she lives with us the rest of our life? And I'm like, I can't talk about that. I won't. Like I would shut him down and walk away because I was like, I can't.
Because you hadn't like you could not do anything beyond this moment or the
Yes.
past. So there was no acceptance. So you were in resistance all the time because you were always waiting for it to change before you could come alive.
So I kept thinking like, if we just get her on the right nutritional program, or if we just get her the right therapy, and when she was first diagnosed, they said, we really think that by kindergarten, you'll with intensive therapy, you'll barely be able to notice.
Right.
We come to kindergarten. That's not the case. We come to first grade, second grade, third grade, not the case.
Yep.
And I kept thinking, well, if we just do this or we just do that, and I'm for all those things. We still have her in therapy. We still watch what she eats.
Sure.
But Johnny's like, I think you need to stop trying to fix it.
Yeah.
In order to be okay. Like you are spending so much time trying to fix the situation that you haven't even sat in it yet. You haven't accepted it yet. And really that led me, because he kept talking to me about things and he's like, I think that there's a deeper process. I think that there's a deeper process. And that really led to me having a huge breakdown around Yana and around my pain and accepting it. And it was amazing and so healing for us, because if you know our marriage story and you listen to that we recorded 2 years ago, he led me through that. Like he was so safe during that season when I was grieving, because he was like, you're going to find life on the other side of this. Like he would say to me, he's like, you're going to have such a heart for her. You're going to find so much life on the other side of this. You're going to feel so envisioned for what our life could look like, even if that means she lives with us the rest of our lives. You're going to find such a vision that you're going to feel God's presence on the other side of this. You're going to feel like this was a gift to you. And it was so healing for me after like feeling so abandoned in the whole process with Yana, that he had felt like such a gift from God that he had walked through it, because it was one of the scariest things I've ever faced, was having to let go and accept that even if it never changes and this is the rest of my life, that God's goodness was in it, and that like I was born for such a time as this. I might not be changing the whole world. Yeah. But I am changing her world. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and really like, he kept saying to me, like Jeremiah 29, where God says, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They're plans to give you hope and a future. He's saying that to the Israelites. Johnny would say to me, he's saying that to the Israelites while they're being exiled into Babylon.
Well, yeah, if you go back a few verses.
That's where he's speaking faith over them while they're being sent into exile, saying, I know the plans I have for you. They're plans to give you hope and a future. Like you are being exiled, but I trust the plan I have for you. And if you go further, he says, while you're in exile, plant gardens, have families, build a life, prophesy. Like basically he's just saying, build a life where you're at.
Well, yeah, it says, before the classic verse that we all know, for I know the plans I have for you. Normally when that is used, the preface to it is you're going to change the world.
Right.
You're going to do a million things, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. But if you read the verses in front of that, it's saying, there's a verse that says, pray for the welfare of the city that you're in. For in its welfare is your welfare. And the city he's talking about is their prison. It's the place where they've been exiled. He says, plant a garden, get married, have kids, get your kids married. There is that's what deep surrender, or what we would call acceptance, that deep surrender is when you can't change anything, of actually planting a garden right where you're at. And that's been the journey for us of getting to there, because the truth is, I would go so far as to say that the prison is a construct of your mind. Because when you don't view it as a prison, it ceases to be a prison.
Right.
But you don't get there if you're sitting there saying, I'm not in prison, I'm not in prison, I'm not in prison.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Right? There's a grief that has to happen.
And
that's
acceptance.
been,
So the acceptance of like, I'm in exile. Like, this is where I'm at.
This is
Yeah,
where
this
what am I
life
gonna
isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's not. I didn't think we would have marriage issues. I didn't think that we would have a daughter with autism. I didn't think it would be this hard. Like, you keep trying to fix it because you think if I can just fix it, I can get back to what I thought God said or what the promise was, and you get to the end of yourself and all you have left is surrender and acceptance. But the beautiful thing is that as you surrender and accept, the prison you find yourself in begins to transform. And that's even what happened with Jonny, and then even in turn what happened with my relationship with Yana is as he was encouraging me and I grieved it and I cried and I got to a point of acceptance, and I had some really crazy encounters with God in that grieving process. Like, it was messy and beautiful all at the same time. And there was some raw moments of me just venting out, like, God, like, where the F are you? Like, why did you leave me in this? Like, like, why, and him just encountering me in like the most loving, beautiful, kind, gracious, fatherly way. He was so precious to me in that moment. But as I just let him love me there and I accepted it, and I was like, okay, I started to see our daughter in a different way. I started to see our life in a different way. Like, I started to see the gift that she was. And I started to see, like, even I had to grieve, like, I always wanted a daughter so bad. I mean, Abby knows she's my sister, but like, there's 5 boys in the family.
Totally.
I always wanted a little girl. I always dreamed of, like, I'm a girly girl.
Yep.
I dreamed of like getting
Hair
my
and
nails
makeup
done with my
and
I dreamed of that kind of stuff. And letting it go and accepting what I got. I have had such beautiful moments with Yana that I would have missed had I not gone on the journey.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've had some legitimate kind of girl mom moments almost.
Yeah.
They're different. They're not
They're kind of
typical,
weird, but they're awesome.
But like, and it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't gone the journey.
Because I would have rejected that and been like, it's not what I would have kept pushing to try to make her and make our life be what I thought it needed to be.
Okay, we'll go to
just
Old
like
Navy
what
and get
Jonny
these clothes.
kept doing. He kept pushing to like make our life something that it wasn't. And it wasn't until we stopped and just accepted it for what it was that's where there was a wellspring of life underneath.
Yeah.
It's interesting because in this conversation, it's not one of those, it's not a conversation of give up. It's actually, it's actually a conversation about learning how to be powerful. Like what you were letting go of is certain expectations of what it had to look like. And in the acceptance process, it's about becoming powerful in the midst of that. So like, it's like you were talking about when they're in the middle of exile, it's like, oh, but can we create gardens? Can we build families? Can we do something in the midst of this? Because there are certain things that, like, no matter how hard we push on it, we cannot necessarily change. There are certain aspects of something that's like, I can't change that, at least not in this moment. But in this moment, what I can do, and that's something that you guys kept finding, is that it's such a powerful message. What can I do? And part of it was, even you, Jonny, I'm looking at your story and I'm going, the powerful thing that you found that you could do is you could look internally. You could be honest with yourself about what was driving you and what you were running from. And you could actually begin to tackle that. And you could begin to get honest with yourself and honest with Pietze inside of stuff. And you could begin the repair process. You couldn't fix her and you couldn't even fix you, but you could be open to it. It was like this invitation was on the table, and you began with a, yes, I'm going to engage this. I'm willing to look at it. And just starting there, like, it wasn't like,
Yes.
it was just it began with this yes. And that was very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I completely agree that, and this is kind of the end to this story arc within our life, is all of a sudden we realize there are things in our life that we can change, right? We can actually be powerful. Like, and you find that as you go on pathways, you find this sense of victim, 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 victim. You look at your pain, you get aware of what's going on inside of yourself. You get aware of those lies that are driving you. And all of a sudden you recognize, oh, I've been on autopilot.
Yeah.
And my autopilot keeps taking me to this destination that I feel so victim to. And actually there were things that we could change, right? There was a garden that could be planted. We just didn't realize that planting a garden would make a difference. We were trying to get back to the homeland.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we were trying to get out of exile.
Yep.
We thought that was success. And all of a sudden realizing, oh no, I actually have something that I can do. I can be powerful. So it's so good.
And I
what you're
think
saying.
Yeah.
the cool redemption about all of this is that our marriage and family went from a place where we were surviving and trying to get away from, like, even our kids, it's like, okay, just get through the day till we can put them in bed and get a break from them.
Yeah.
Like, literally, we
It's
lived
real.
for
Yeah.
when we could be away from them.
Yeah.
Like, but we loved them and we loved them
Sure.
hard, but you're just like exhausted and you have nothing left and at the end of
Yeah.
your rope. And I'm not saying that there aren't times or days like that,
Sure.
but truly, and our marriage was, a place that we were trying to get through. Just so much
Yeah.
unsafety everywhere. To like, now I feel like our family is a place where we step back to recharge. Like, it's actually peaceful. It's a regulating force in our life. Our marriage, our relationship is a regulating force in our life.
Like,
our
now
family,
it's a sense of
spending-
strength. Now it's a resource, not the drain.
It's resource. Spending time with our kids. We love spending time with our kids. We live for the moments where we get done with work and they come home and we can snuggle up with them and we have margin. We have,
Wow.
we couldn't handle our kids' emotions because we couldn't deal with our own.
Yeah.
So there was no room to sit in their negative emotions. There was no room to work through things. When they had meltdowns, it was like, seriously, please just get over this. I need you to get in line so that we can get all the things done so we can.
Totally.
There was no space. Now there is so much space to sit with our kids, to work, to be the type of parents that we set out, that we thought that we would be. And it's life-giving. Like, we have found so much joy and so much purpose right at the bottom of the pit.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom of the pit.
Yeah.
Jonny,
And,
what would, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna, I just feel like if there's one thing I could say to people who are in my spot, right? Like, if you're in a place where your life is out there somewhere, the thing that's going to fix things, make you happy is out there. And if you are somebody who is disconnected from all the pain inside of you, however you do it, whether you can go on pathways or not, I encourage you, do pathways if you can. But whatever you do, please spend time actually getting in touch with what's going on under the surface. Find a way, go to counseling, get a consultant, do pathways, do something, because especially if you have kids, especially if you have a family, you're missing your life.
And it's never
You're
too
missing
late.
it, and it's never too late. I have a client who is in he's a grandpa. I think he's in his 60s. And he started meeting with me back in December because his wife said that he cannot connect to any emotion at all. Super traumatic childhood. Been to tons of counseling, but completely zero emotion. And when she has emotions, he can't connect into it. And as he's gone on this journey, he'll sit in our sessions and weep.
Wow.
The guy who couldn't have emotions at all, didn't even know what they were. And then he'll put things together and say, oh, I realize this is why I couldn't ever let my wife have emotions. Is their marriage completely fixed? No. But I'm telling you, I don't care what age you are. I don't care what walk of life you're in. If some of this stuff resonates with you,
Do something.
don't let this moment pass you. because there is actually a garden that can be planted in your life where there's goodness in the midst of the
storm and the
prison
chaos.
that you think that you're in. There is a garden that can be planted
In the midst of the circumstances you can't change.
Yeah.
Johnny, what would
There's a
you
pathway
say?
out.
What is your relationship with purpose now? Like, where have you landed for yourself
That's a good
personally?
question.
I don't know that I have landed.
Where
yet.
are you at currently? That's a good
Where I'm at
good.
currently is I'm just very comfortable with every day. For those of you who
Present
have
moment.
for those of you who have read like Practicing the Presence of God, Brother Lawrence, who was like a 15th century monk, primarily because he had health problems, his whole life was washing dishes.
Wow.
And yet he loved the Lord and he just kind of stayed in the moment every day. Whatever he was doing, he was in that moment. I'm finding a ton of purpose in just loving my kids really well and loving the, handful of clients that I meet with, my wife. And I don't know that that's for everyone in every season.
Sure.
Or
right?
that it will be your entire life.
Or that it will be for my whole life.
Yeah. But right now.
But right now, I feel like my garden's doing quite well. You know what I mean? Like if I were to describe to you how I feel about purpose, I would say, I don't really know, but I know that the garden is doing really well.
Love that.
That's so good, Johnny. I can't help but think like since 2020, this has got to have last 3 years for a lot of people. This has to bring a lot of this stuff to the surface because I think that so many people got their kind of like their vision shattered. They're running on the hamster wheel. They could go after things. So many things started collapsing in on them, and probably been just trying to work through the other side of that. Like so much chaos was brought up inside of families beginning in 2020, and so the last 3 years has been probably a lot of people just trying to get by and figure out like how to put life back together and stuff like that. And I think that there's so much hope in your story, like in the middle of 2020 and you melting down and all the stuff that was happening with that. Like here you are, you guys are you're not perfect, but you're you're on your own pathway, right? To being able to not only like live a vibrant life in the moment now, but also you're getting to impart that to other people. And it's really hopeful. And I know, like, I mean, I've watched your journey, Johnny and Pietze. I've seen both of you. I've seen the change that's happened. I've seen the engagement from your heart, Johnny, where you're so much more of a present father, friend, husband. Like I see all that, and it's tangible in the way that you relate to people, and you're able, even the idea that you're able to help people connect to their own hearts and stuff like that and communicate is like miraculous. I mean, that in itself is like, who in the hell would have thought that Johnny Duffield was going to be a guy?
You guys knew Johnny before.
Yeah.
That Johnny Duffield was going to be the guy that's sitting with a 60-year-old man, and the 60-year-old man is crying in front of him, and Johnny helped facilitate that space and can relate to it and be present with it. So I'm just in awe of all of that. And it's a testament of your yeses,
Yeah. And I do love, I'm sitting here thinking about how redemptive God is, that you, who probably shut down the emotions in your in the family unit, actually, because you went on your journey, were able to be a part of the stability in opening that up for your family. And I just think it's cool that you, like, whatever you've done wrong in your family, whatever you've done wrong in your marriage, because we've all done a lot more than we thought we would.
100%.
But it's so hopeful that there's always hope for redemption. And, this is a message obviously close to your heart. Come alive where you're planted.
Yeah.
The basis of your entire book, The Tree of Life.
Yeah.
And I've seen the exact journey that they've gone on, you go on, and like, in our current season where I'm really sick, you're able to be present with me and loving towards me in a way you never were before, because you've been able to come alive where you're planted and not just wait till something is better to become who you are going to be. And so I just want to recommend, like, pain can either make you less of who you are, which Johnny had talked about. He'd become less of who he authentically was, but pain can also bring you back to yourself.
Yeah.
And so
Can make you or break you.
Well, you can soften with the pain or you can harden with the pain. So this is our encouragement and the hope that if you see no way, it's very normal. Trigger brain is black and white and is really focused on threat. Like that's what our bodies do to help us survive. So as you heal, you start to see more options and more choices. You like scientifically have more ability to cut through what looks impossible. So we have, we're going to wrap this up. If you guys want, I recommend you pay attention to the whole series. Pietze and Jonny are going to talk through multiple areas that they've learned, especially in parenting. This is where I've seen the biggest result is them changing the way they parent and their kids dramatically changing. So follow along for that. But we're going to leave with a every time we do a course, we do a celebration call at the end where people share what their journey was like, and we're going to leave with just a sweet video.
A sweet audio.
This is not a video.
A sweet piece of audio.
You have to imagine what their faces look like while you're listening.
But it's a really precious piece of audio, and really hope you guys are touched as much as we are by hearing it and experiencing it firsthand. So
share the podcast with people you know. Sign up at justinandabby.com. We like you all.
I'm so excited to share because I had one of the coolest moments of my life just recently, all because of this class. I didn't even know if I should take this class. I had found the podcast just like a little bit before, and I've done a ton of EMDR and emotion code, like a lot. And so I was like, I'm just going to do it. And so I did the full immersion course. Loved every minute of it. Like the immersion is worth 1,000,000 times the extra money. So anyways, I had this situation where my family, we're a blended family, we're eating dinner, and there were some members of the family talking about one of this thing that happened a year ago. It was one of the most painful things that has ever happened to me. And they were like completely unaware of what it would be like for me to hear this. I was just bothered, like enough to go, why am I bothered? I must be triggered. Like what's going on? And so that night I started remembering, taking myself back to that moment. And I remember getting really angry. And so I was like, okay, angry is a protector emotion. So that's not the real emotion. And so I let myself feel the pain of the rejection of that moment and lost it. And then I'm like, but I'm bringing pain history to this moment, right? Learned it in the class. So what's my pain history with rejection? And I just asked my heart and God to like bring me back to relationships or moments that I hadn't processed the pain of rejection of those things. And I just like went on this journey, like in my imagination, and it would come in waves and I would just cry and grieve. In the midst of it, I was like, okay, to unconditional love because I am always accepted. And the next morning I woke up alive, like a piece of my heart was alive and free. And I was like, I'm not even rejectable, which I know like healing will come in layers. So I'm not saying I'll never deal with it again, but it was like, oh, you don't even have the power to reject me because I know my worth. And that's like not about me. It was like so beautiful. And I had signed up for Living Fully Alive already, full in, like the top thing. And I'm like, I can't wait because this has been, of all the work that I've done, I would say I've grown more from this class. What came out of me, it was like this roar of like, I'm not partnering with rejection anymore. And I realized like somehow in these moments, I believed it because of their behavior. I don't believe it anymore. Like I'm not partnering with this lie or this belief system anymore. Like I'm breaking it. And I communicated that to the people involved. I was just like, this is what happened. And I'm not partnering with it anymore. So this is where I belong. This is what I'm doing. And the cool thing is it's not in therapy, right? Like I'm not paying anybody to do this. I learned this work and just did it on my own by leaning in and being self-aware. It's like amazing. So thank you guys.
All right. We going away? We done? We are
Adios.
done.
Amen.
Goodbye.